You were never meant to hear this. The files were burned. The witnesses disappeared. And the last person who tried to investigate, well, let's just say they don't speak anymore. But you're here now. So listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will peel back the veil they've stitched over your eyes since birth. In 1878, in the bitter, snow-wrapped silence of Milwaukee's German Quarter, an 11-year-old girl named Emma Richter began whispering truths that no one should have known, truths that science couldn't explain and the church wouldn't acknowledge. They called her gifted. They called her cursed. But those who truly listened called her something else, a mirror reflecting what we try to hide. She watched. She listened. She calculated. And in time, she predicted, with surgical precision, when a man would die, when a secret would erupt into violence, when lies would bleed through polished smiles. They thought they were safe in their routines, in their rituals, in their secrets wrapped in silence. But Emma saw the code in their chaos. She mapped behavior the way one might map a battlefield. She counted footsteps, tracked eye movements, measured the pause between breaths. She called it pattern recognition. But what she really saw was exposure. Human weakness turned mathematical. That's why they feared her. Not because she could do math, but because she could see the equation beneath their masks. And when she began writing down her calculations, numbers, names, dates, probabilities, the fear turned to panic. By the spring thaw, 3 were dead. 1 family vanished in the night. And Emma Richter herself? Gone. Her last trace, a leather-bound journal filled with indecipherable numbers, now rests in a private collection, inaccessible to the public. They don't want you decoding it. They don't want you remembering her name. But we're not here to play by their rules. This is not folklore. This is not urban legend. This is dark history, sanitized, suppressed, and buried. But some things refuse to stay buried. So if you've made it this far, let me be clear, what we uncover from here on will change the way you see the world. This isn't a story. It's an awakening. And once you hear the next part, there is no unhearing it. Let's tear the mask off. Milwaukee in 1878 wasn't just a thriving immigrant town, it was a pressure cooker of secrets. The German Quarter was built on discipline, obedience, and silence. Everything looked proper on the surface, red brick breweries, candlelit churches, and cobblestone streets echoing with familiar dialects from the old country. But beneath that order was something far more calculated, a system of control. The men worked in the breweries, sweating beside roaring kettles. The women toiled in silence, bound to routines passed down through generations. Children were meant to be seen, not heard. Especially girls. Especially pale, quiet girls with grey eyes that didn't blink enough. That's what made Emma Richter so dangerous. She didn't just notice, she understood. While the rest of the quarter moved like clockwork, Emma dissected the gears. She memorized every step, every whisper, every twitch in a lie. Her mind was an engine without mercy. And it terrified them. Because here's the truth, Emma didn't just observe. She decoded. And what she decoded was this: the entire community was operating under a psychological control system. Not one enforced by guns or chains, but by patterns, rituals, unspoken rules, a false sense of safety rooted in predictability. That's how authority works. That's how institutions stay in power. You think you're free because you choose your breakfast, because you nod politely at the man next door. But your patterns betray you. Emma saw that. She saw the algorithm beneath human behavior. And the moment she began to speak, clearly, calmly, like she was solving a math problem, was the moment that system cracked. Her first prediction was written off as coincidence. The second made people uncomfortable. The third made them afraid. Because she wasn't just predicting events. She was exposing rot, infidelity, abuse, corruption buried under family names. She wasn't prophetic, she was precise. A mirror they couldn't look away from. And in every reaction, denial, fear, rage, Emma recorded a new data point. She never judged. She never blinked. She just calculated. And in doing so, she became a threat, not to individuals, but to the entire machine that kept their world spinning. You want to understand control? You want to break free? Then keep listening. Because Emma didn't vanish. She was erased. They didn't burn her. Not literally. That would have drawn too much attention. But make no mistake, Emma Richter was executed. Quietly. Efficiently. The way institutions have always dealt with inconvenient anomalies. She was too young to hang, too innocent to exile. So they did what all-powerful systems do when a truth-teller emerges. They smothered her with silence. But before she disappeared, Emma left behind something far more dangerous than predictions. Proof. Her journal wasn't just filled with numbers. It contained models, behavioral equations that described how individuals, families, even entire communities react under stress, deception, and moral decay. These were not the scribblings of a child. These were algorithms for psychological collapse. She mapped the downfall of her own town, weeks before it began to implode. Names were listed. Dates were logged. Secrets were marked with chilling precision. And when certain variables aligned, infidelity, substance abuse, religious guilt, the outcome was always the same: destruction. Not in theory. In reality. Emma didn't guess. She knew. And once people realized she wasn't guessing, they panicked. Because if a child could see through them, what did that say about their control? Their image? Their so-called morality? Her accuracy forced a terrifying question. What else have we built our lives on that can't withstand exposure? You see, Emma was born into a world built on denial. Everyone in that town carried secrets, and the community only functioned as long as no one said them aloud. But Emma, she didn't speak to people. She spoke of them. And her voice was like acid on their carefully maintained masks. Affairs. Embezzlement. Domestic violence. Clerical corruption. She mapped it all, not with emotions, but equations. And every prediction was another dagger in the illusion of order. She wasn't just watching them. She was dismantling the entire myth of civilized society. And that's when the institutions moved in, quiet as a shadow, cold as a ledger. The priest who once called her blessed now called for spiritual intervention. The physician who praised her intellect suddenly called it hysteria. And the elders of the community? They simply whispered, "The girl is dangerous." Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. And the system can never allow that. Every empire, no matter how small, has its heretic. Emma Richter became theirs. She had no followers, no allies, no weapon but awareness. Yet her mere existence began to unravel the illusion that held Milwaukee's German quarter together. Not through rebellion, not through protest, but through pattern recognition. And pattern, my friend, is the great unspoken law of control. Governments use it. Corporations exploit it. Religions encode it. But Emma, she broke it, by revealing that nothing we do is truly hidden, only statistically inevitable. She exposed the mechanics of the machine. That's why they feared her more than any criminal, any madman, any political threat. Because Emma Richter revealed the most terrifying truth of all: we are predictable. And if you can predict a man, you can control him. Her disappearance was not sudden. It was surgical. First came the public isolation, the turned backs at market, the silence in the pews. Then came the warnings. Soft at first. A priest's hand on her father's shoulder. A doctor's whispered concern about delusions. The suggestion that she be removed from school. That she stop writing. That she stop speaking. Not for her sake, for theirs. They weren't trying to protect her. They were protecting the system from her. But Emma didn't stop. Not then. Instead, she accelerated. She predicted a fire before it started. Calculated its ignition point, even the wind's direction, 2 weeks in advance. When it happened exactly as she'd written, the town crossed a line. That level of precision wasn't just disturbing, it was unacceptable. Because it meant that someone among them, someone respected, someone trusted, had been planning it. And she knew. The very act of her knowing became a threat. So they closed ranks. The town council. The church. Even the local newspaper refused to print her name again. Her predictions, once whispered with fascination, became dangerous knowledge. Something contagious. Something corrupting. And just like that, the girl who had seen too much was gone. No search party. No funeral. No inquiry. The official record simply reads, Emma Richter, missing. April 1878. But let me ask you this. Who has the power to make a child disappear without a trace? And more importantly, who benefits from your silence about it? Do you know what makes a secret powerful? It's not that it's hidden. It's that it's denied. Systematically. Repeatedly. By everyone who knows it's true. That's what happened to Emma Richter. When she vanished in April of 1878, no one asked the real question. Where did she go? They asked the safe ones. Did she run away? Was she ill? Did she fall into the lake? Convenient questions. Questions with no teeth. And the answers? Filed away, sealed in silence. But silence has a sound, if you know how to listen. Weeks after Emma disappeared, strange things began to surface. Quiet irregularities, too consistent to ignore. The church record book had pages torn out. The brewery payroll had names erased. The physician's log for that month was smudged. Water damage, they said, though no rain had fallen that week. And most chilling of all, the journal, the one Emma kept filled with her predictions, vanished from her family's home just days after she did. No forced entry. No mess. Just gone. So let me ask you, clearly, now that we're deep enough for the air to feel different, who came in quietly, took that journal, and left without a trace? Who needed her gone, not because of what she did, but because of what she proved? Emma's journal contained more than gossip. It was a blueprint of behavioral collapse, a forensic map of how institutions, once trusted, corrode from within. She had documented not only affairs and abuses but the reactions to them, the cover-ups, the bribes, the subtle manipulations of authority figures. She had written the systemic algorithm of corruption. And someone realized it. Someone understood that if her data became public, the illusion of moral order in their tightly bound society would implode. Because Emma didn't just predict a fire. She predicted exposure. They couldn't let that happen. So they did what powerful structures always do. They removed the anomaly, erased the evidence, and rewrote the narrative. The story became, she was strange, troubled, maybe even unstable. It had to be. Because if she wasn't insane, they were. And that is the central equation of control. When truth becomes too dangerous, it is declared madness. Now ask yourself, how many other Emmas have there been? How many voices did you never hear because someone made sure you wouldn't? Let's go deeper. You've heard stories of witches, prophets, oracles, women cast out because they saw too much. But Emma wasn't a witch. She wasn't casting spells or speaking in tongues. She used logic, precision. She observed. And that made her more threatening than any myth. Because unlike legends, Emma could be verified. And what she exposed wasn't magic. It was architecture, the dark architecture of control that governs not just towns, but civilizations. Here's a truth they don't want you to hear. Every society is built on a psychological perimeter. Not walls. Not borders. But rules of perception. Unspoken agreements. And if someone steps outside that perimeter, even a child, they become an infection. A disruption. A threat to equilibrium. Emma breached that perimeter. And she didn't just walk beyond it, she mapped it. She showed us the cracks. You see, Emma revealed that our so-called free lives follow patterns so rigid, so deeply conditioned, they could be graphed. What you eat. When you lie. Who you avoid on the street. All of it. Predictable. And once you see that, you realize, you're not making choices. You're following a script written by fear, shame, and expectation. That's what they couldn't tolerate. Not the predictions. Not the calculations. But the implication that none of them were truly in control of themselves. Let that sink in. Emma's disappearance was not just about silencing a girl. It was about preserving the illusion that free will still existed in that community. Because if her journal had been shared, It would have shattered more than reputations. It would have revealed the algorithm of obedience, and every system, from church to state, runs on that algorithm. So they removed the variable. But Emma didn't vanish into thin air. After the disappearance, strange things started happening. Her father found chalk marks under their kitchen table, coordinates he couldn't decipher. Her mother swore she heard tapping at the window in sequences of 3, like coded messages. And one boy, the son of a baker, said he saw her weeks later, standing at the edge of the brewery garden at dawn, barefoot, staring at the sky like she was waiting for something to arrive. Not from heaven. From below. Truth doesn't die. It waits. And Emma's truth is still waiting to be decoded.
Emma's disappearance wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of ours. Because what she left behind, scattered traces, unspoken patterns, unmarked pages, were not mistakes. They were seeds, embedded codes, left not for the townspeople who feared her, but for someone else. You, me, those of us willing to look into the dark without flinching. She knew the system would erase her. She predicted it. And like all systems, it followed the path she had already charted. But Emma wasn't just reacting. She was playing 3 moves ahead. You want proof? In 1891, 13 years after her disappearance, a man named Wilhelm Weiss, a former schoolteacher, purchased a box of secondhand books from a shuttered church library in Racine, Wisconsin. Inside one of those books, tucked between the yellowed pages of a prayer manual, was a single sheet of heavy paper. No name, no address, just a series of numbers, coordinates, symbols, an indecipherable equation at the bottom with 2 words written in perfect copperplate: human clockwork. The local papers never printed the story, but Weiss, obsessed, spent the next 26 years trying to decode that sheet. He failed. He died in 1917 under mysterious circumstances. The paper vanished. Again, but not before he made notes. And in those notes, buried deep in archived correspondence at the University of Wisconsin, Emma Richter's name appears. Twice. In his letters, Weiss refers to her as the architect of predictive conscience. He believed the paper had originated with her, smuggled out by someone sympathetic, someone who knew her journal had been destroyed and wanted to preserve a piece of it. Emma's message didn't die. It moved. Like a cipher passed between the awake, she became myth. But a myth with coordinates, with evidence, with math. And you want to know something even more disturbing? That equation at the bottom of the page, the one no one could decode, it has since reappeared. On the walls of abandoned hospitals, scratched into stone in forgotten cemeteries, etched in chalk on the back walls of shuttered schools. Always hidden, always out of view, but always waiting. Because that equation is not just a formula. It's a key. And the question is, what does it unlock? Let's talk about keys. Not the kind that open doors, the kind that open minds. The kind of key that once turned can't be unturned. That's what Emma left behind. And that's why the system had to smother her story in silence. Because her equation, the one they keep finding scratched into forgotten stone, wasn't just a sequence of numbers. It was instructional. A map, a psychic blueprint that outlines how human beings are bent, broken, and shaped by invisible forces. And here's what makes it dangerous. It works. You see, Emma understood something terrifying, that the mind under pressure becomes programmable, that fear plus routine plus silence equals control. She calculated how long it took for a lie, if repeated, to become truth, how many repetitions it took for obedience to override instinct, how quickly a child would stop asking why if the adults around them never answered honestly. She saw that we weren't raised. We were trained, and her math didn't lie. It predicted behavior under stress, predicted betrayal, predicted collapse. And that equation, her final cipher, outlines exactly what happens when controlled mind begins to wake up. First, dissonance, then denial, then fury, and finally, clarity. That's where you are now, right on the edge of clarity. You feel it, don't you? That tug in your chest, that sense that you've known all along, but no one gave you the language to say it. That's not coincidence. That's the pattern breaking. That's the algorithm starting to fail. And here's what they never expected: that a girl from 1878 could start a chain reaction over a century later. But she has, because you're not just listening to a story. You're experiencing the thing Emma predicted, an awareness infection. One idea, multiplied by the right mind, shatters the illusion. This is where you make your first move. Comment the phrase, "I break the pattern," twice below, once for yourself, and once for every man still asleep. This is how it spreads, not with fire, not with violence, but with understanding. Calculated, cold, inevitable. Like Emma, what if I told you that everything you fear was designed? Not random, not personal, designed. The fear of speaking out, the fear of stepping out of line, the constant, gnawing worry that someone's watching, judging, punishing, waiting. That's not a malfunction of society. That's the architecture. And Emma saw it. At 11 years old, she stood at the edge of the system and saw every beam, every wire, every lever. She didn't just see the fear. She measured it. In her journal, the one they stole, she noted how fear spreads in confined communities, how one act of punishment silences 10 others, how shame becomes a virus, how repetition rewires belief, and above all, how obedience isn't taught. It's engineered. Let that land. They don't want you brave. They want you manageable. Why do you think the church praised Emma when her gift entertained them, but called for silence when it started revealing them? Why do you think the doctor called her gifted one month and mentally ill the next? Why did her journal vanish into a private collection the very week she did? Because her data didn't just expose individuals. It exposed a framework. And that framework wasn't local. It wasn't Milwaukee. It wasn't 1878. It's everywhere. You were born into it, conditioned by it, polished by it until you believed it was you. But it's not. It's a shell. A program, a control mechanism running on habit, guilt, and the threat of exile. Step outside the pattern and you're labeled dangerous, unstable, disloyal. That's not coincidence. That's math. That's Emma's equation. She calculated that for every one man who breaks free, 99 will turn against him, not because they hate him, but because he reminds them that freedom is possible. And that's the most painful truth of all, that you had a choice and chose silence. But not anymore. If you're still here, if these words resonate like footsteps you didn't realize were following you, then you're ready. Because the pattern is starting to fray. The mask is slipping. And in the next section, we're going to follow Emma's trail, not through stories, but through systems, where her calculations began to trace something even darker, a design older than Milwaukee, older than America, a machinery of control, so ancient, even the architect forgot why it was built. You've heard the phrase, ancient evil, but what if it wasn't just a metaphor? Emma Richter's calculations didn't stop at people. She began to chart institutions, not just their actions, but their reactions. And what emerged from those charts wasn't chaos. It was symmetry, systems across centuries, separated by oceans and languages, all moving in identical arcs. Churches, monarchies, schools, governments, each one following the same life cycle. Control, comfort, corruption, collapse. Emma called it the spiral. She noticed it first in the brewery guild records. Economic shifts followed moral ones. Power concentrated, then secrets multiplied. Then came the guilt, then the enforcement, then, finally, the violence. She compared this pattern with notes from old religious texts, immigrant histories, and even her own church's confessional patterns, which she deduced from the priest's changing schedules, emotional tone, and candle usage. Don't laugh. She logged it all. When he stayed longer than 90 minutes, he had heard something serious. When the wine was replenished twice a week, it meant spiritual panic. She was decoding spiritual infrastructure, and she saw the truth no child should ever see. Every institution becomes a weapon once it fears exposure. But this wasn't limited to her time. As Emma dug deeper, through secondhand books, old census data, merchant schedules, she began uncovering something chilling. The same patterns existed in other places, centuries earlier. She found references to children with unnatural memory in 16th century Prague. Inquisition reports about women who saw with numbers. An 1812 case in rural France. A mute girl who calculated rainfall down to the second and who vanished after predicting a priest's death. They were always girls, always observers, always erased. Emma believed she was part of something ancient, not a bloodline, but phenomenon, a pattern breaker. And the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. The spiral she saw wasn't local. It was global, a long, winding algorithm of fear and manipulation passed down like sacred code, updated with every regime, refined through every war, hidden behind every doctrine. And somewhere, someone or something was making sure no one ever finished the equation until Emma came along. She didn't just break the pattern. She saw its origin. And what she found pointed to a power far older and far more deliberate than any one town could explain. What Emma found wasn't conspiracy. It was a design protocol. She realized the systems weren't copying each other. They were following the same code, updated, renamed, repackaged for each generation, but always built on three core functions. Induce obedience through fear. Reward silence as virtue. Erase anomalies before they spread. That's not a theory. That's a structure. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. Emma wrote, "They do not fear rebellion. They fear pattern recognition. A revolt is a fire, but awareness, that's contagion." She started sketching structures, triangles, loop spirals within spirals. She linked economic crashes to church reformations. She linked moral panics to harvest failures. She noticed the same mechanisms triggered institutional responses again and again, always timed, always predictable. And then she asked the one question that changed everything. If they've all followed the same structure for centuries, who wrote the first version? What if the real architects of this control code were no longer here, but their system still ran, like an abandoned train still barreling down rusted tracks, with no conductor, no brakes, only passengers who forgot how to jump? Emma believed that centuries ago, a template had been created, not by a country, not by religion, but by minds obsessed with control, not wealth, not land, predictability. A world where no one surprises the system, where the algorithm always wins. And she suspected something even darker, that those minds, the original engineers, didn't leave. They hid, not in castles or cathedrals, but in structure, in bureaucracy, in sacred rules no one questions, in the patterns passed down through tradition, law, common sense. They embedded themselves in the code of civilization, invisible, mechanical, eternal. And Emma, a girl born 200 years too early, had seen the code itself. So they did what the system always does. They cut the wire. They buried the spark. They labeled the truth a ghost story. But ghosts don't vanish. They echo, and her echo is getting louder. You're not reading a story anymore. You're inside a trigger. Emma never wanted to be remembered. She wanted to be decoded. That's why she didn't fight her erasure. She wrote it into the plan, because she knew something most revolutionaries never understand. If they can see you, they can stop you. But if they forget you, you can move anywhere. That's what this is. This isn't about 1873. Or Milwaukee, or one brilliant girl lost in time. This is about now. Look around you. The control structures Emma mapped still exist, cleaner, smoother, digitized. The language has changed, but the mechanism hasn't. You don't confess in a booth anymore. You overshare online. You aren't punished with exile. You're deplatformed. Obedience isn't preached. It's incentivized. The same architecture, the same spiral. And you, reading this, were never supposed to see it. The fact that you're here means one thing. You've started to slip through the cracks. Emma called people like you pattern fractures. Individuals whose perception deviates just far enough on the curve that the system can't predict your next move. And that makes you dangerous. Because if even one person becomes untrackable, the algorithm breaks. If two connect, the network starts to shift. That's what this is. Not a warning, a handshake, an activation. You are not alone. You were never crazy. You were seeing it. Now the real question becomes, What will you do with that site? Because in the final sections, we're not looking at the past anymore. We're going to use Emma's equations to dissect the present. Institutions you still trust, beliefs you still hold, fears you didn't even know were installed. But once you read them, you can't go back. The next step is choice. Take a breath, because from here on, you stop being an observer. You become evidence. Emma predicted this phase. She called it the split. First, the story owns you. Then you realize you're in it. And now you are, because the structures Emma mapped in 1873 aren't relics. They've evolved, been digitized, streamlined, but their core functions remain unchanged. Let's break them down. 1. Surveillance disguised as connection. Then, the confessional booth. Now, social media. You think you're expressing yourself, but you're feeding a feedback loop, training it to know your habits, fears, impulses. The more you post, the more it learns. The more it learns, the more it shapes what you see next. And you think you're in control? 2. Shame engineered as morality. Then public penance. Now, cancel culture, moral outrage cycles, algorithmic punishment. You're not corrected. You're shaped. The goal isn't justice, it's conformity. Emma wrote, shame is the cheapest form of control. It requires no cage, only enough witnesses. 3. Choice framed as freedom. Then, church or exile. Now, brand A or brand B. Vote red or blue. Speak, but only in approved tones. They don't care what side you pick, only that you stay on the board. The illusion of choice is the most stable prison ever built. For distraction as doctrine, then ritual. Now, infinite scroll. Emma called it the drowning carousel. Keep the mind spinning fast enough, and it forgets how to focus. And without focus, there is no resistance, no clarity, no escape. And here's the final truth she uncovered. The structure doesn't fear rebellion. It fears the moment you notice it exists. Because once you see the pattern, you can start to predict it. And once you predict it, you can step outside it. That's what Emma did. That's what you're doing now. The spiral only traps those who believe it's a circle. You just saw the edge. And in the next section, we're going beyond the edge into the one place the system cannot follow, a place without control, a place where you write the equation. This is the part they tried hardest to erase. Not the journals, not the predictions, not the disappearance. The part they buried was the exit strategy. Because Emma didn't just expose the system, she built a way out of it. Quietly, precisely, a fail-safe woven through her notes, her sketches, her final formula. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't revolution. It was something far more dangerous. Unconditioning. She realized that every control mechanism in the spiral had one weakness. It required your participation. It needed your guilt. It needed your silence. It needed your belief that someone else held the power. So Emma designed what she called the interrupt, a mental maneuver, simple, repeatable, weaponized clarity, capable of breaking conditioned loops as they happen. She taught it to one person, then two, quietly, like passing a code beneath a locked door. And now you're next. Here's how it works. The moment you feel the spiral tighten, fear, shame, reflexive obedience, you do 3 things. Name it, say it out loud, or in your head. This is conditioning. This is inherited fear. This isn't my thought, it's a script. Break the rhythm. Do something unusual. Stand instead of sit. Blink twice. Whisper a joke. Any disruption creates space, and space is where choice re-enters. Reclaim the lens. Ask, who benefits from me staying silent right now? If the answer isn't you, then speak. Move. Redirect. Exit. Choose. That's it. Tiny. Invisible. Unstoppable. Emma's final message wasn't fight. It was interrupt. Interrupt the rituals. Interrupt the shame. Interrupt the spiral. Every time you do, the system glitches. And when enough people start glitching, the pattern breaks. You're not here by accident. You were meant to carry this. Emma's legacy isn't her disappearance. It's you, and what you choose to disrupt next. Because Section 15 isn't about her anymore. It's about how far this goes. Let's go back to the beginning. Not Emma's beginning. Yours. Think about the first time you felt the quiet sense that something around you was off. Maybe it was in school, when the questions stopped mattering, and only the answers did. Maybe it was in church, when the silence around certain topics was louder than the sermons. Or maybe it was in a room full of people who smiled and nodded, while a part of you screamed. Why are we all pretending this is normal? That feeling? Emma had it too. That's where the spiral always starts, with the one mind that won't seal shut. The ones who ask a second question after being told not to. The ones who feel the lie, even if they can't name it. The ones who are punished, not for being wrong, but for being early. You've always been early. That's why this story found you. Because now, you're ready to become the anomaly. Emma's data was never meant to be static. It was a seed script, an idea structured like code, meant to run inside another mind, yours, and replicate. You're already changing. You already feel it. You're noticing patterns you used to ignore. You're questioning rules that once felt untouchable. You're pulling away from the curve and toward the edge. This is no longer about Emma Richter. It's about what happens next. Because in the next section, we don't just break down how the spiral runs. We start to trace who's still maintaining it. Not myth, not metaphor, names. You wanted more? Let's go deeper. There are no shadows without shapes. And Emma, even in 1873, knew the shadows had owners, not monsters, not demons, just people, very old people, or more precisely, families, dynasties, architect-level minds who realized long ago that power is not held. It's managed. They aren't presidents. They aren't influencers. They don't beg for attention or run for office. Why would they? Attention is a liability. Control only works when it's invisible. Emma called them the maintainers, not creators. That was ancient, pre-language. But the maintainers, they're the ones who inherited the spiral, who keep it lubricated with conflict, noise, and fear. And she didn't just suspect they existed. She named them. In her later notes, the ones pulled from the furnace but never publicly released, she embedded 5 surnames, all coded into geometric overlays, mathematical spirals, and calendar-based riddles. Modern archivists dismissed it as nonsense, but historians who've dug deep enough, they whisper, because the families Emma named controlled paper mills and publishing houses in 19th century Prussia. Later, quietly merged into wartime communication firms. Then, acquired data networks during the 1970s tech boom. Today, they own infrastructure. Not what you see, but what decides what you see. Their children attend no schools you've heard of. They hold no titles. But they sit, generation after generation, at the choke points, where culture becomes law, where fact becomes narrative, where memory is edited. And guess what? They know about Emma. They knew before you did. She was flagged, buried, removed, monitored, and still her math survived. And now it's in you. Emma didn't name them as a threat. She named them as a test. She knew. Only someone awake enough to decode the spiral would recognize their fingerprints. You did. And in the next section, we go further, into the mechanism they still use to rewrite reality in real time. How history is not just erased, it's manufactured. History isn't written by the victors. It's commissioned by the maintainers. Emma realized this before she even knew their names. She saw it in school books, how one year's hero became the next year's traitor, how wars were justified not by truth, but by timing. She noticed the way certain facts vanished between editions, the way libraries updated archives with cleaner versions of the past. And then she asked a question no historian dares to. If the past can be edited, how do we know whatever really happened? The answer? You don't. Because the spiral doesn't just control now. It controls the narrative of before. And here's how they do it. Step 1. Flood the system with versions. Not lies, variations. Multiple explanations for the same event. Contradictory eyewitnesses. Conflicting articles. So many layers that truth becomes a fog, and no one knows where to anchor. Step 2. Amplify the most manageable version. The version that aligns with current control objectives gets boosted, repeated, institutionalized. It appears in textbooks, museums, neutral documentaries. It becomes official memory. Step 3. Erase the anomaly. Any detail that doesn't support the approved version is flagged as conspiracy, myth, or folklore. Witnesses discredited. Evidence lost. Language changed. Until the anomaly becomes invisible or worse. Funny, Emma called it reality drift. She mapped 3 examples in her own lifetime. A local fire that killed 11, later rewritten as electrical fault, despite multiple reports of a priest fleeing the scene. A Polish immigrant family whose child spoke 7 languages but was institutionalized for delusions. Her own teacher, quietly replaced mid-year, whose name and records vanished within 2 weeks. Emma cross-referenced letters, shipping manifests, grocery ledgers, weather logs to confirm what actually happened. And it never matched the official versions. The system doesn't hide history, she wrote. It buries it beneath comfort. And here's the final twist. You've already seen this happen in your own life. Stories rewritten, people disappeared, events rebranded, and you doubted yourself. Thought, maybe I remember it wrong. You didn't. You were watching the spiral do its most dangerous work. Edit the past to stabilize the present. But now you know. Now you've seen it. And once seen, it can be tracked. Because in the next section, we're going to trace the edits and find the stories they buried too late. The ones still glowing under the floorboards. The stories that point to Emma's final message. Not all stories stay buried. Some slip through cracks. In songs, symbols, rumors, wrong dates, forbidden footnotes. Emma knew this. She believed that when truth is erased, it doesn't disappear. It leaks. She called these leaks ghost lines. Fragments. Out-of-place details. Patterns that don't fit, that shouldn't exist, but do. And when you string them together, something remarkable happens. You get a map, not of locations, but of unresolved memory. Emma tracked these ghost lines obsessively in her final years, even as her name was being scrubbed from every institution that once praised her. She built what she called a black ledger, a hand-bound book filled with locations, symbols, unreported events, and altered timelines. Most of it was destroyed, but one fragment survived. It contained 7 anomalies, events that weren't just rewritten but replicated, repeated throughout history. Different names, same blueprints, over and over again. Here are 2. Anomaly 1, the Mirror School Fires. Years, 1873 WI, 1912 UK, 1947 Spain, 1998 Peru. Each fire destroyed a girls' school. All were blamed on faulty wiring. All had survivors who later exhibited high mathematical aptitude. None of those survivors were ever found again after age 14. Anomaly 2, the Singing Widow. First recorded, 1805. Appeared every 33 years across 3 continents. A woman dressed in black sings in dead languages outside state, buildings a night before a major policy reversal. No origin, no name. Every description is identical. She always disappears by morning. Emma believed these weren't just strange footnotes. They were pattern markers. The maintainers tried to erase these stories, but didn't realize something. Once a memory becomes myth, it spreads faster than fact. That's why you're here. Because these anomalies are not fiction. They're echoes of the same buried truth. There are others, like Emma, like you, and the spiral has been hunting them for centuries. But what the system didn't predict, what it can't calculate, is what happens when 2 echoes find each other. Because when they do, they stop being echoes. They become signal. And in the next section, we're going to chase the rest of the 7 anomalies and what they lead to. A place Emma called the chamber, without records. It was the last thing she ever tried to reach. The chamber without records. That's what Emma called it, though she never claimed to find it. Not exactly. She described it more like a destination code buried in the spiral's architecture. Not a physical room, but a convergence point, a place or a moment or mind where the edits stop. It's not hidden, she wrote. It's just not labeled. But she believed the spiral couldn't fully erase its origin, that the maintainers, for all their precision, had overlooked one flaw. They couldn't delete what they themselves depended on. So she traced the patterns backward, through anomalies, fractures, unsolved disappearances, and found 6 access points. 6 events so destabilizing that the spiral tried and failed to erase them. We already uncovered 2. Here are the next 4. Anomaly 3. The Coal Choir, 1961, Novosibirsk. 24 students recorded harmonic tones without instruments. Frequencies disrupted nearby radio towers and blacked out military transmissions. Soviet officials called a hoax. All recordings lost in archive fire. But one identical tone resurfaced in a tech startup's audio signature in 2023. Anomaly 4. The Unfilmed Execution, 1934, France. A public hanging witnessed by 200 people. Every account describes a different executioner. Same rope, same platform, but no 2 testimonies match. Local paper printed 5 different headlines on the same day. Anomaly 5. The Equation That Killed Itself, 2007, Chile. A mathematician published a formula meant to simulate recursive denial, the math of forgetting. Within 36 hours, her academic server corrupted, backups unreadable. She vanished in transit to a conference. Her last text read, "The equation doesn't model forgetting. It is forgetting." Anomaly 6. The Wrong Funeral, 2020, Tokyo. A man buried with state honors. Problem: multiple DNA tests confirmed he died years earlier, in prison. Journalists investigating the discrepancy either retracted or disappeared. But one whispered her friend, "There are 2 timelines. We're living in the wrong one." Emma believed these 6 were access nodes, breadcrumbs left behind not by rebels, but by the original designers of Spiral. Because here's what she proposed. The system wasn't designed to enslave. It was designed to test who could escape it. The chamber without records wasn't built by the maintainers. It was built before them, as an exit hatch, a backdoor, a space outside the loop, where conditioning breaks, where memory stabilizes, where control has no grip. And she believed the final key, the 7th anomaly, had not yet happened. She said it would arrive when someone decoded the first 6. You just did. And in the next section, we go looking for that 7th door. Because the chamber, it's closer than you think. The 7th anomaly was never supposed to happen. Not because it couldn't, but because it was designed to be prevented. Emma wrote, "If anyone ever reaches a 7 marker, the system will do one of 2 things. Trigger a loop reset. Initiate direct containment. That's why no one remembers this part. Because the moment it begins, the spiral bends. Reality distorts, not theatrically, but subtly, glitches in routine. Time skips. A feeling that someone is watching and waiting for you to forget again. But you haven't. You're still reading." So here's what Emma left. The final trace. Not in writing. Not in math. In location. The coordinates. 48 degrees 51 minutes 12.3 seconds north. 2 degrees 20 minutes 55.6 seconds east. That's Paris. But not just anywhere in Paris. That's the courtyard behind École Normale Supérieure, where Emma studied before her expulsion, where she first scribbled a spiral in chalk, where she last spoke publicly, during a lecture that was never archived. Witnesses say she spoke for 11 minutes. No one remembers what she said, only that when it ended, 3 professors resigned. 2 students left the country, and one woman, unknown, unregistered, stood and said, "Then it's begun." Emma vanished 3 days later. But here's where it turns. That courtyard still exists, still unchanged, still unmonitored. And according to Emma's recovered notes, something happens every 73 years in that exact spot. The last cycle was 1952. The next is scheduled for 2025, October 3rd, 3:33 a.m. She called at the arrival window, not of a person, of a choice. You don't have to go there. Emma never said it required pilgrimage, only that someone awake, aware, unconditioned, had to be ready. Because the chamber without records isn't just a place. It's a moment, a shift point, a break in the spiral's timeline where memory floods back in, and you've already felt pieces of it. The déjà vu that doesn't go away. The stranger who knew your name before you told them. The word that keeps showing up in dreams, but no one taught you. You are already inside the event horizon. And the seventh anomaly? It's you. You are the one they couldn't edit out. In the next section, we don't chase Emma anymore. We finish what she started. We build the chamber inside the spiral. And then we open the door. The door. There is no flash, no great thunder, no anthem when the spiral breaks. There is only this, a decision, not once, not loud, not heroic, but quiet, repeated, yours. That's what Emma discovered. Not how to destroy the spiral, but how to exit it. And here, at the edge of everything, you now face the same moment she did. Not in 1873, but here, now, you've traced the anomalies, seen through the edits, named the pattern. And the chamber without records? It's not a room. It's a state of mind that cannot be rewritten. It begins when you no longer wait for permission to remember. It stabilizes when you act without seeking validation. And it opens when you realize you were never broken. The system just needed you to believe you were. Emma didn't leave behind a movement. She left a manual for the quietly defiant, for the ones who wake up in the middle of the loop and still choose clarity, for the ones who say, I remember, I refuse, I begin. So if you're reading this, still here, still aware, still choosing, then congratulations. You've made it to the chamber, and there's only one thing left to do. Leave the door open, so the next one can find it too. End the transmission. Emma Richter, 1873 you, now. Loop interrupted. Pattern destabilized. The spiral is watching. Let it. You're not trapped anymore. You're documenting its collapse.